In the last few years, cultural heritage in Soqotra has gone a sort of revival of interest, and there's a number of research projects that have taken place. And this work has slowly begun to help us better understand the complexity and diversity of Soqotra's cultural heritage. So within this talk, I'll introduce some of the variety of cultural heritage sites, but as well as some of the traditions and practices that have been recorded, and then highlight the threats they're now facing, especially in these times of political and climate change. So if you ask the many botanists, ornithologists, malacologists, herpetologists, ethnologists, and other ologists that study plants and animals on Soqotra, they will tell you that its importance lies in its rich and distinct fauna and flora, which does not occur anywhere else in the world. Or they'll tell you that the island supports globally significant populations of birds, including a number of threatened species. Or they'll even tell you that it has an extremely diverse marine life. However, with so many archaeologists having studied Soqotra's natural heritage, it is perhaps unsurprising that the fauna and flora of Soqotra is the most well-studied in the world. Indeed, even as an archaeologist, I'm keenly aware that every time I've accidentally stepped on something living, it was probably endemic, and may have, or even at least now, would be endangered. A good example is Duvalliadra diascordis, a critically endangered succulent that only grows on Soqotra, highlighted here on the left in red, of which here there's estimated to be less than 50 individual plants on the planet, and, which I hasten to add, I've never knowingly sat on or stepped on. If you ask any historian, archaeologist, or ethnographer about Soqotra, they will tell you that its importance lies in its rich historical record, diverse cultural heritage, and its unique language. While several historians, archaeologists, and ethnographers have studied Soqotra, there remains so much we still do not know that it could be argued that Soqotra's cultural heritage is amongst some of the least studied in the world. Indeed, Soqotra remains a treasure trove of archaeological sites and intangible tradition that still need to be documented. Unlike, however, the endangered plants and animals on Soqotra, the loss of one site or tradition does not make it in danger, but extinct. Despite numerous and extensive cultural heritage databases that can be found from the mainland of Yemen, none have included Soqotra. Indeed, Soqotra's cultural heritage appears to have been forgotten time and time again. Thankfully, this situation has begun to change with the establishment of the Soqotra Cultural Heritage Project, which I had the pleasure of working on. Funded by the DCMS and the British Council through the Cultural Protection Fund between 2017 and 2019, and run by the Centre for Middle Eastern Plants at the Royal Botanical Garden in collaboration with a number of partners. Some of the first steps were taken to address a huge disparity between the natural and cultural heritage of Soqotra, and importantly, put the Soqotra's cultural heritage on the map. However, to ensure that this project was driven not by the perceived needs of a few cultural heritage experts, but by the real needs of the Soqotri people, whose heritage it is ultimately, we asked the Soqotra project team members, we have a project. It's funded to document Soqotri heritage for 2.5 years. What do you want? And they said, okay, we would like the capacity to actually document our heritage. Fine. We'd also like a resource that we can actually have this documented knowledge somewhere and use it. Fine. We'd also like to conserve our heritage for the future, certainly. And we'd also like to share the benefit of our heritage with others, which is particularly interesting. So with these guidelines in place, we started. And with the capacity we provided the team with a range of skills that allow them to document their tangible and intangible cultural heritage. And these included normal traditional archaeological and ethnographic recording skills, GIS skills, kite aerial photography, and even filmmaking skills. Now, before I show you the Soqotra Heritage Database as it stands now and some of the sites, it's useful to know where this work started from. Indeed, understanding what went into the database will give you an idea as to what they achieved in 2.5 years. One of the earliest archaeological expeditions from what it has sort of been possible to map the sites of was recorded by an expedition run by Brian Doe in 1967. As seen here, there are a number of sites we were able to record and map, 62 to be exact. However, many of these sites are in guest-best positions, as the names of the areas and villages they were recorded are not actually known to exist, and even some of the names that they've mentioned refer to things that we've never been able to find, and locally there's no knowledge of these areas. The sites we were able to record and find the location of, well, this is one of them. What you're looking at here is actually not a fort recorded by Doe, but in the foreground an Emirati-owned container shipment yard, and on the left a fish factory, in the center of which was constructed over the fort. Unfortunately, this is also an area within which the Russian expedition located stone tools believed to date to the Paleolithic period. However, all is not lost, as not far away we did find another site mentioned by Doe, a site known locally as the Flat Rock. When this site was recorded by the Soqotra Heritage Project team, it quickly became apparent that it was going to be built over. Indeed, the land had already been demarcated into plots for housing. So the team, in collaboration with the landowners, local Sheikh Goem, and the then governor of Soqotra, came together to protect this site. And now it is the first cultural heritage protected site on Soqotra, a site that has also been instrumental in fostering awareness of cultural heritage with local school children, and now also has an interpretation board in Arabic and English. Archaeologically, this site is especially important, not only for the huge range of motifs which document some of Soqotra's past history, but also specifically this motif, the ancient South Semitic script, that is of yet undeciphered and undated, yet bears striking similarities to a script found in Dhofar. Moving on. In the 1980s, Namkin and Sedov conducted numerous surveys and excavations across the island. Although, much like Doe, the positions have had to be taken from publications, as it was not possible to get hold of these positions from the Namkin or Sedov. And while we also had many difficulties in relocating these sites, 20 of which we've managed to map here, with the help of local informants, we were able to relocate some, such as the dolmens pictured here. Some of their local involvement during numerous surveys conducted throughout the island was actually an integral aspect of this project. Not only did this help create awareness, but also helped helped us greatly increase the number of sites that we've been able to record, included of which is one of the earliest settlement sites on Soqotra that, according to the finds of red glazed cups and bowls and a Roman amphora handle, was dated to the 1st centuries AD, one of the earliest sites on Soqotra. During 2001, Lloyd Weeks, with the help of Miranda Morris and her many informants, surveyed 79 sites, many of which were in the interior. These sites and their GPS positions were shared with the Soqotra Heritage Project, and as such we were able to easily mark them on the map and revisit some of those that required additional recording, which, due to the terrain of the interior Hagia, was a real test of the team's fortitude. Indeed, this area, despite being exceptionally beautiful, remains one of the least well-mapped areas on Soqotra archaeologically, and it's perhaps unsurprising if you look at this picture here why that is so. Having outlined the work undertaken by others, this final map demonstrates the work of the Soqotra Heritage Project team, the white dots, alongside that which was previously documented. While some of the previously recorded sites were visited, they are not included in the total of 409 new sites that the team has recorded. Actually, as of last week, this is 410, a testimony to the team who are continually working on the documentation, protection, and preservation of a heritage that is under increasing threat from the political and climate changes sweeping through the island, despite the fact there is no funding for their work. While there's not that much time to show you even a quarter of the many important sites that have been recorded, I shall quickly go through a few of those that hold huge promise for future work and those that are often ignored. I would also refer you to the Soqotra Heritage Project Twitter account, which often refers each week to a new site. The first pictured here is an extensive building complex, one of several that have been mapped and are believed to date to early centuries BC AD, when Soqotra was a major supplier of incense, dragon blood, and aloes. Many of these sites, which range in size to over 3 to 5 kilometers in places and 600 square meters, are often linked to an extensive series of walls on the island that, as you can see here, have literally covered the entire island. While much work remains to be done on these wall systems and these associated structures, it was clear that Soqotra was never a pristine island untouched by humans, but was being intensively exploited by them. In addition to the settlements in the interior, there are these structures found along the coast. While we have no pottery evidence on these sites, it is likely that they functioned as lookout sites, so unfortunately unable to have dated these sites. We have also come across these sites here, scattered various areas across the circular ring with the central grave in there, and various quite similar sites are found all over in the south coast as well. And we come across to one of the islands where this appears to be a stone anchor that was put upright like this by local fishermen as a marking point for them. It's quite a unique find, and as of yet, we have no parallels. And now we come to this, which was often dubbed a throne, but it's likely to have been a series of rocks that were put up and then collapsed later. However, this central area of rock is surrounded by circles of rocks, and they occur in various forms of disarray throughout the island, especially in the interior western side. And finally, in testimony to the Russians, we have these T-34 tanks that have been left behind and are stationed throughout the island from Galansia all the way through to Hardibu along the coast. And in some cases, it is possible to enter these, although they are still protected by the military and appear to be functioning within, strangely. And then I'd like to just quickly mention some other work that we've been involved in, and these are the cave burials on Soqotra. So these cave burials on Soqotra are a long part of a tradition that has a long history, but for which we have little information. This has, up until recently, been the case. However, myself and several Soqotra colleagues have begun investigations to look at the ancient DNA within these caves and other areas. A project that was funded by National Geographic and is working in collaboration with Kendra Surak High and others on the Reich Lab to better understand the Soqotri people. I believe that the results are due out in the next couple of months. Looking forward to that. However, not all is good. Looting on Soqotra has always been a bit of a problem ever since it was first recorded in the 18th, 19th century. And recently there's been increase of looting due to the market for these objects that are being found. While I've managed to view many of these objects, of course, they lack provenance. Indeed, I am not even allowed to know where they may have come from, whether a grave or whether they dug out somebody's back garden. However, as these artifacts are being bought up slowly but surely, there's an increasing market and there's very little control currently on the island. It doesn't bode well. So with all these sites, it was clear that we needed to put them onto a database. And no matter how impressive this work is, it would be utterly useless if it remained in an academic publication or sat on the servers of an institution. Indeed, as the team told us, they wanted a usable database of sites and knowledge. Consequently, a major part of this project was the establishment of this cultural heritage database, one that could be used by the Director of GOM and other government officials to mitigate against the loss of their cultural heritage in the face of development works that are continuing apace. Using Arches, we have set up a database that was shared with the GOM Director, who can use the functionality of this database on his computer, while also using the app's Arches collector on his phone to input additional sites into the database. As such, we can help ensure the long-term sustainability of this database and the data therein, and for the Soqotri people, in helping them protect and conserve their heritage, and to foster an overall awareness of this heritage locally and abroad. An awareness that is especially important with regards to Soqotra's intangible heritage, which has recently been subjected to a number of attempts by foreign actors to deride and subvert them. Camel racing is not a Soqotri tradition. As many of you may be aware, the language on Soqotra is Soqotri, one of only 6 ancient South Semitic languages. While not officially classified as endangered, the Soqotri language is under increasing pressure from outside influences, and fewer people on Soqotra are able to speak it. One way in which the Soqotri language is kept alive is through Soqotri poetry. During the course of the project, 2 heritage festivals were held, bringing poets, singers, dancers, and local theatre groups from throughout the island together to showcase the Soqotri language and their performance arts. In keeping with the tradition of these festivals, only Soqotri is spoken or sung, and only Soqotri traditions are showcased, and there are no monetary prizes as such, contrary to other cultural heritage festivals currently ongoing. As part of these festivals, a theatre workshop was also organized to foster a greater awareness of Soqotra's rich intangible heritage and encourage Soqotri children to become more involved in their language and heritage. The success of this was marked in tears. No, not of the children, but of the elderly, who had thought that their traditions, stories, and language was going to die with them, as the younger generation, as I would quote, were more interested in their phones than in their heritage. It is quite interesting as well, as you'll find there's 1 white face, yeah, and about 4 adults, the rest are children. It was actually astounding to watch. In addition to these performance arts and poetry, Soqotra is renowned for its handicrafts. I will only present a quick rundown of a few here, but if you wish to see some of the videos that the ladies of the Soqotri Heritage Project made of these traditions, I would point you to the website. The first of these handicrafts are the Soqotri rugs, which are part of an age-old tradition that was first recorded in the 10th century, when the Yemeni geographer, historian, and astronomer Al-Hamdani listed them among the island's major exports. The second tradition I'd like to point out here is traditional Soqotri pottery, which has also been made and used on Soqotri for millennium. And archaeologists have found similar pottery like this in use today in some of the earliest ruins on the island, which currently makes it quite difficult to date. While work into this is ongoing, at present at least 3 different pottery traditions have been recognized. The next tradition I'd like to speak to you about is aloe harvesting. part of an age-old tradition from the time of the Periplus mid-1st century AD. And we have also records sometime in the 19th century, which talks of over several tons a year having been exported, and several tons of the aloe juice, not certain aloes. So you can imagine the intensive exploitation that was necessary to create these tons of juice. Then, previously unrecorded, the Soqotri enjoy a wide variety of games, which constitute an important part of Soqotran heritage and society. With the beginning of modernity and civic life in Soqotra, the last quarter of the last century, folk games are at a risk of being forgotten. However, with recent work, the traditional games have not only been recorded, but have been reinvigorated, and you can now find them being played again throughout the island, although football is still the most popular game played. Some of these games, as you see here, involve a degree of manual dexterity using sticks and stones, and often jumping. And I'll tell you now, no matter how tall and far I think I can jump, there's no ways I can beat any Soqotri on the planet right now who are jumping in excess of 1.5 to 2 meters directly up onto rocks. With such a rich culture, it is surprising, or perhaps not, that there have been no attempts to include it in the many conservation zoning plans pictured here. What we did do is ask Soqotri team members and GOM to outline some cultural heritage areas that they had been recording sites in and put these on a map that could potentially be included into these protected areas. And the results were particularly surprising. Many of the areas, as outlined here, fell within those areas currently designated as protected areas for natural heritage. Clearly, culture and natural heritage could both benefit and seem likely to be interlinked. Indeed, including cultural heritage into some of these management plans would not require much additional work in terms of the designated areas, but it would allow for cultural heritage on Soqotri to begin to enjoy at least some of the benefits that have been afforded to the natural heritage over the last decade, if not longer. Benefits that it sorely needs at this time when climate change has begun to severely impact the island. While much work has been done with regards to the effects of the extreme weather events on Soqotra's natural heritage, little is known about the effects these events have had on Soqotra's cultural heritage. During my last visit to the island, I was fortunate, perhaps unfortunate enough, to have witnessed the effects of these extreme events, such as this landslide pictured here, which almost let me miss my flight and was quite restrictive in getting to some of the fieldwork places. Also pictured here are the effects of this weather on those areas near the sea. No, not the ship that was stranded here, but the Gujarati stones that actually lie quite close to the sea, and if not moved, will probably in the next extreme event be likely to have been washed out to sea, or at least buried in what is a wadi that empties into the sea, and it currently is certainly threatening these stones. Yes, they have been recorded. In addition to these sites are the historic buildings on Soqotra, such as this historic mosque pictured on the right here. Unfortunately, as you can see, many of these historic structures have almost all become rubble. But as with the mosque pictured here on the right, most of them can be dated to around the 19th century, potentially earlier. And while locals have attempted to prevent further collapse, lack of funds, coupled with recent events with the heavy rains and strong winds, are putting tests to all of these monuments. And it won't be long before much of this is indeed rubble. So the question lies, where to from here? With the many and varied threats facing a heritage that has long been forgotten, there's a real need for further documentation. Documentation that has and can be undertaken by Soqotri heritage practitioners. There is dire need for protection from climatic events, increasing development works, and the increasing looting that continues on the island. And finally, and strangely, potentially, is sustainable tourism. Basically, directing tourism away from the one-sided view on Soqotri as being an island with little more to offer than strange trees and animals, but an island with a rich and varied cultural heritage that is integrated with the natural heritage. So thank you. I will take any questions. And finally, just thank you to all the organizations that have been involved in this project in helping revive interest in Soqotra's cultural heritage.